Welcome back to video 3 in our series on vintage guitar picks. We're now going to take a look at some very early US made guitar picks. These are persons, primarily players, and we have a number of picks here going back to 1890 up to the 1940s. All of these are made of celluloid. And these two patines down here may actually have some graphite in them. We'll get to those later. One of the highlights, and actually I consider most all of them really highlights, but a couple of feature picks here that could possibly challenge the Cristofaro for the oldest pick would be the winner, the long golden swirled mandolin pick, seen right here. And winner actually stands for Septimus Winner. Septimus Winner was highly popular in the 1800s. Penned a lot of songs. He was a composer, banjo player. He played violin. Had his first hit published in 1853. And when I come across that pick, a dear friend of mine sold it to me, Brian Bouchard. And he couldn't make much of it, and I couldn't either. I just knew that it was hand-beveled, which indicated it was made 1920s or prior. That's a celluloid style I had never seen. And since it was impressed, I knew it was a really old pick. It was only later that I found out it was Septimus Winner. And that's what it stands for, and it is could be used for both banjo and mandolin. And that pick there could possibly go back to the 1880s. That's unverified right now, but he had a lot of work published in the 1850s, 60s, and 80s. It was actually put in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. It came much later, though. Another pick that could possibly challenge the Cristofaro for the oldest pick, but again unverified, is this Odell pick here. And the Odell pick possibly and most likely stands for Forrest Herbert Odell, and he was the son of Ira, I believe it was, and who was the father who went into business in 1870, and Forrest took over the business in 1892. But Forrest became very popular for his mandolin playing. He cut a number of songs, and some of them made it to vinyl, very early vinyl. So we'll go back to that and see why that might challenge the Cristofaro for the oldest pick. Take a look at these other two Cristofaros. Other two Odells here, right here and here. They all have some sort of hole in the middle, which leads me to believe that as they were being worked, maybe they were put in some type of mold for some reason to stabilize them, or fixture feature, and then it was hand stamped. But it's a great pick, extremely rare. Less than, I would imagine, 8 are known to exist. Moving along, we have the Seagull, representing Samuel Seagull, and the Seagull is seen in a 1901 catalog ad. And there we see an actual seagull. He indicates it's trademarked. He was a mandolin virtuoso as well. And now we have the Mayflower. This pick is actually the name of a young girl, at least at the time this one was probably made. It's hand-beveled, as you could see here. It wasn't tumbled in a machine. And Mayflower was the daughter of Harry Flower. And in 1904, he announced a line of instruments bearing her name, Mayflower. He was a harp guitar producer, manufacturer out of Chicago. Now, her picture does appear on a catalog page as early as 1901, though. Here's another Mayflower, but it's later. This one is machine tumbled. It's not hand beveled. Very nice celluloid. Late 20s, 1930s. And I believe that tumbling by machine became really popular in the late 20s or 1930s because so many picks were now being produced at that point. It was impractical to actually do them by hand. You can move on to the Charles McNeil here. This is a really nice banjo pick. Take a look at the McNeil impression. Almost looks like it was engraved. And he was very popular. He, excuse me, McNeil published a number of books and received a patent as well in 1924 for plectrum banjo. He created, I believe, the first slide. Gibson in the 1930s made a line of guitars bearing his name. Next we have Giuseppe Patin. Now DeAndre produced Patin picks from the 1920s up until 1960s. But they were actually made before that. And this pick here is hand beveled. You could see how that was beveled, and possibly by a rotary file as well. But clearly it was not made in a machine. The same with this smaller Patin. Again, hand beveled. Both sides. And we have some more Patins we're going to look at in a moment. We're going to go over here to the Schädelmayer, though. The Schädelmayer here on the far left. And Schädelmayer was a tenor banjoist out of Pittsburgh. And I date all these picks, all three of these picks here, to the late teens. This one possibly late teens, and these two 1920s, late 1920s. We'll take a look at a couple of the logos on the Schädelmayer pick here. Real nice impressions on them. An interesting celluloid. You don't see that kind of celluloid anymore. Next up, we have the Will Clare. Another nice impression on the Will Clare. And Will Clare, from what I understand, had a trademark in 1926 for distribution of guitars, banjos, ukuleles, and other instruments. And this is a hand beveled pick. So it leads me to believe that the Will Clare is early or mid-1920s when they actually come out with their business and announce their product line. Here's the Santos Superb. Now, I can't be very certain what the Santos Superb stands for, but I do know back during that period of time from 1910 to 1930, there was a Santos Hernandez who was a great classical guitar builder. He would have no reason to be really manufacturing picks, but that's as close as I could come. But anyway, Santos Hernandez made a classical guitar that was actually owned by the late, great Andres Segovia. Next, moving on to the Bradbury. And we got a couple of Bradburys here. Take a look at those logos right there. Yeah, nice impressed logo. By definition, any pick with an impressed logo such as these is really a rare pick. And Bradbury was also a banjo player, at least Frank was. He wrote the method for plectrum banjo in 1926. He was well known. But, you know, again, we have a Benjamin Bradbury who was a banjo innovator and had a patent in the 1890s. Well, I know these are celluloids right here, and both of these are hand beveled, by the way. These celluloids existed from 1900 to 1920, so it could possibly be him too. Not certain, but I'm more inclined to believe it's the banjo player. And moving on to the Warner pick, and I previously mentioned the name James Luck Warner, who was a luthier, builder of instruments. But this is possibly could be Frank Warner, who wrote a book on tenor banjo. However, this pick here is traditionally considered of this size and shape a mandolin pick. But really old, part of U.S. history. We also have a Roy Smeck here, Roy Smeck was a really popular instructor, and Will Hoover does a good job of covering Smeck in the first book on picks, called Picks. Moving over here, one of the hugest names we have is Gene Autry, and you'll see the impressions on these Gene Autry picks. Beautiful, almost hand-engraved signatures. And these are spanning a time, 1920s to the 1940s here. And here's the last Gene Autry. And we know this is late 30s, 1940s, by the appearance of the celluloid on a pick guard from a guitar made in about 1940. But this goes back, this style of celluloid, again with hand beveling, that's 1920s. And many of the names, perhaps most of all of them I mentioned here, you could go online and verify and find out for yourself and take a look at some of the background on these people. I'm just giving you a really brief run through here. Another great guitarist, jazz guitarist, but he played everything really, is George Barnes. And George Barnes was highly admired in his day, yet you wouldn't know of him today. He first recorded in 1938, played on hundreds of albums, including Patsy Cline's 1957 session, played guitar for the Drifters, Jackie Wilson's hit Lonely Teardrops. He was a staff musician at the NBC Orchestra, and this is a style of what we call wheat straw, this particular type of color variation, wheat straw. So that's 1940s, but these are earlier picks right here on this celluloid. Moving down here at the bottom, we have some Nick Maniloff's. Nick Maniloff sold a lot of picks from at least the early 30s to about 1970. And these are the earlier models, and two different sizes here, and you could see in 5 different colors though. And here's a very, very small Nick Maniloff, again with a very light impression, now coming into focus. Now I saved these patines for last. There's some interesting features about them, even though they're not hand beveled, which would tell me they were probably made after 1930. They do have every indication of being hand punched, because if you take a look at the shoulders, and the shoulders of the, excuse the shake, the shoulders of the tops right here, that's the head, shoulders on either side, you'll see that they're asymmetrical, which is most likely caused by a hand stamp that punched them off. But these two on the right, they have an interesting cast to them. They're not totally black. They have this shiny gray touch to them. Maybe you could see it right there. But this leads me to believe that this material is embedded with graphite. And this could be first examples of graphite picks we have. Giving a year for those, I would go 1940s, 50s for these 3 right here. So there you have some great names, folks. I invite you to take a look on the internet at some of the names I mentioned here, and you'll see during their period of time in U.S. culture that these were huge names at the forefront of the pages. So, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. This is Joe from Playmore. Bye-bye.